Good morning. Good morning. This is season 6, episode 19, number 237. After I said good morning, I thought maybe I shouldn't have said good morning because people might be listening to this in the afternoon or the evening, and I don't like dating myself. I like for us to live on the internet in a space where people can walk in and be like, "Hey, it's happening." Like,
Greetings, then. You just say
but then I
greetings.
sound like an alien.
Greeting? Oh,
Greetings. Greetings
greetings.
from my little head to yours. Chris, how are you today, my man?
I'm well. I'm well and awake, ready for Saturday.
I love that you're ready for Saturday, but you're on vacation, bro.
I'm
So
still on
I
vacation.
I want I want to hear all about your vacation because, and I think I told you this in one of the many ways that you and I communicate with each other each week, is that as soon as you said that you were on Twitter again, but only as a vacation, it hit me different. It hit me different. I was like, okay, Roland, stop. I literally, for me, sometimes things have to be as concrete as I can make them. So I literally imagined you going on vacation. You pack a bag, you're holding a plane ticket, but the only difference here is that your bag's digital. There is no plane ticket, and you literally just went on your device, went
Hmm.
to Twitter. I guess you hit the on switch so that your
Hmm.
account would be open again, and here you are chilling on Twitter as a vacation, and then I suspect once you've had enough, or maybe you have an idea of a timeline in your head when you got to leave your vacation, you'll leave.
Hmm.
Um, so, uh, man, tell me about that because I find it fascinating. Mentally, it's fascinating to me.
um, no, you hit. I mean, you hit all the kind of like the right pieces of it. I have I guess the way to start with looking at it is that I thought to myself, I have some questions, I have some stuff I want to seek. There's some stuff I want to, I guess, research. So I guess it's a little bit like a working vacation. Um and realizing that
Working
a
vacation.
working vacation, yeah. Which is good, but working not as in let's say supporting, like I'm working to support me. So I'm working in order to sort of take more vacations, let's say. Like that's kind of the specifics here. So coming back to Twitter, um, I am pursuing connections about photography. I'm pursuing connections about poetry. I'm, I guess, as a offshoot, still kind of using it as a creative space. However, using Twitter doesn't, there's nothing about Twitter that makes me feel creative. Nothing. So it's a very kind of practical kind of usage of Twitter. Um, the people that I'm following, it's probably maybe less than 5%, maybe even less than that, are teachers, people involved in EDU, which is very different than where I was before. Um, there's some new peeps that I'm following. Let's say, like from the last time I was here, I wasn't vacationing. It was like I moved away. So that's kind of like in some ways I'm vacationing back to a hometown, maybe sort of trying to see it in new lights. So being here, I'm pursuing artists, creatives, wellness stuff, um, some Buddhism stuff, which is fascinating to me right now. Some of the marketing stuff that you and I have talked about, like that connection between marketing and mindset, checking out some of those kind of people. And what I'm doing is so that's kind of like what I'm checking out. So I'm walking the streets, noticing the little things, taking some notes. I'm liking some stuff, reaching out with some DMs to asking people stuff, and the whole time kind of taking it all in as to what has changed in the last 2 months. Which, if we're talking geographically speaking, if you visit if you sort of leave a town and come back to a town after 2 months, you're probably not going to notice much change. Like no matter how hard you look, like it would be, I think, pretty difficult. I go to Toronto maybe once or twice a month, and I'm not noticing condos every single time. I need to not notice for a while in order to go, hey, wow, look at what they're building over there. And I think being away from Twitter, it's the same thing. However, it's accelerated because even coming back, the interface is a little bit different. So I left partially, as some of the stuff was blowing up about Mr. Musk, and just thinking, yeah, now would be a good time just to take some time away. The effect though is that coming back, stuff is different. The 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 UI is different for Twitter. I feel like the whole UX, like the user, my experience with it feels different on it. Um, the algorithm feels different as to what's being put up in front of me. Um, and it's interesting. I know I messaged you sometime this week or last week, just kind of saying what's kind of cool is the anonymity. Cause like I've got nobody following me. Like I think I have 6 or 7 followers. And there's liberty in that. It's funny because what that does is I have no audience to play to. And I think no matter how sort of magnanimous, benevolent, kind of open-minded you think your posts are, you are playing to your audience. It influences you. And in the moment that you never get to be unaware of the fact that you have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 followers. Like it becomes part of the why of going to a social media tool. And I'm sensitive to that on Instagram. Like I'm aware when I post out that I'm landing in inboxes. I have none of that on Twitter. And so it's kind of cool because I feel like I respect that and I accept that, but I also am not looking to prove myself there. Like I'm not looking to get people to follow me. Um, and I'm not looking to sort of offer value in order to get people to follow me. So it's kind of funny, though I feel no creative juices, which is what I really crave, which is why Instagram is a great place for me. Um, Twitter is just I feel like I'm walking into an office building that just has a kind of like an office building that just has kind of cool things hanging on the walls that I'm kind of I don't feel an emotional connection to it, but it's a cool informational bit. And it's funny because I think without all the clutter of my previous let's say timeline, I'm noticing things quicker. Like I can sort of see right away who it is I want to follow and I don't want to follow, and I sort of do that. I'm also noticing, and this is kind of interesting, some of the people that I've gone back to following, or even just checked out their feeds if their feeds are available. I'm really noticing how different they are between spaces. Um, So there's some people that I follow, and I'd look to see how they post on Insta and how they post on, Facebook and how they post on Twitter. And I might just be stating the obvious. It's I'm in this space where I'm like, yeah, I really do not want to follow you in this one space. Like the content you're putting up, despite our relationship, is not interesting to me. And the last thing I'll say is this is one of the challenges that I find right now. And it's kind of like how I use Twitter versus, let's say, how I use social media versus how other people use social media. Um, like I don't have a direct pathway to monetization. I actually only recently, well, sort of old recently, I played with Redbubble, and I guess you could argue that's a way of kind of thinking about your social media presence from a monetary perspective. So Redbubble, you can put up your art. It's like Society 9 and like an Etsy, but for art stuff like you, and they'll make stuff and that was like 2 years ago. I think I mentioned that to you. So some of my stuff is up there. The decoded stuff is up there. I haven't got a lot of traction. It's funny. I just found these, um, and these were cards. I'll show you. These were little cards that I had made based on that watercolor painting that I made a few years back. Um, so, anyways, I'm monetized slightly that way. Um, and just recently on my WordPress, where I'm posting up my poetry, they added a function into there where, and I actually am not quite sure how it looks from the outside, but if you go to my WordPress site, somewhere there's a banner that pops up So I pay for WordPress, so it's not there's no advertisement on it, and that was kind of intentional. Not kind of, it was intentional. Um, but there's a banner at the top that says, "Do you something to the effect of, do you want to gift this artist WordPress?" So there's no like buy me a coffee, crowdfunding kind of element to it. But it says right there that, if you wanted to show, you could show appreciation by paying for the next. And I actually don't know if you can contribute in part or buy it entirely. But it was funny as I posted that up, I'm like, am I now sort of stepping into this exact kind of space of, um, well, I guess it's my version of Web 3.0. Like I'm kind of stepping into the space of, um, I guess it's entitlement. Am I entitled to transition from just offering art and creativity to sort of asking, putting the hat out and say, "Hey, do you want to pay for my stuff?" And I won't say that's exactly a part of my operating system. Like I'm not seeking that, but I didn't. Now that I've done this thing, I can't deny this thing, right? I can't say I'm not sort of engaged in this monetization of a side hustle. Um, so Twitter's been cool. I like it right now. I don't know the broader plan. I will say flat out, when it's no longer interesting to me, I've proven that I can maintain the relationships that are still good for me. And there's people that Twitter was my kind of starting point. I don't think I developed new friendships from Facebook. All it was kind of like connecting old friendships. Instagram was I find a space just where I connected with creatives, and creatives that are willing to connect back with me and have conversations. I had some great conversations with individuals there that I respect as creatives. Twitter was the place where I met new people. And I think the bridge was education. So I walked across this bridge of talking to other teachers. And then, I mean, that's how you and I connected. Like that was our starting point too. And I think I learned from you that that type of digital relationship is as real as, the face-to-face stuff that you can make. Like it's not face-to-face then digital. It can be digital and then face-to-face. Like it can go virtual to in real life if you do the work. So I've managed those friendships, and I'm still connected to them on Insta. And I even have people's mobile numbers so I can text them directly. So like I have relationships that start on Twitter and came back. Um, and I'll stay as long as it's one of two things will happen. I kind of become bored with the interface. I'm like, okay, this is just too much. Or I feel like I've gathered enough stuff and I need to now go back to another part of my life to start actively using that stuff. And that kind of comes back to the researching part. I mentioned to you about street photography just before we hit the air. And that's something that I'm really fascinated by. I'm really fascinated right now trying to develop my understanding of using Lightroom. Uh, and of course, writing. Uh, that's it. That's the whole kind of thing. And you, I don't know if we did this on air or off air. I'm hyper aware of that. I no longer crave to look for things on social media that somewhere in my brain goes, this is going to be great for being a teacher. I'm no longer kind of creating that. I'm not channeling what I find on social media to say that's going to go back and help my career, help my students. I don't think I care about that anymore. Specifically, as my relationship to Twitter, and it really was that was the thing that I was using for Twitter primarily before. I wanted to find out more teacher stuff. I think I just got like, I don't care about teacher stuff anymore specifically. I care about Chris stuff. I sort of care about kind of building myself, fortifying, nurturing, doing good stuff for me, and keep posting up the results of that, whether it's my photos or my poetry, art that I create. Keep posting it up because, like you were mentioning before, you talk to other individuals like, how do I build my brand? I think a great way to build a brand is to not build a brand. Just do the work. Don't think like you're building something bigger than your name. You're better off be firm in your name and be intentional and passionate about what you're sort of putting on social media, whether it's professional for teachers or creative, and just keep putting it out there. Keep putting it out. Keep putting it, like just keep populating your portfolio. And I'm really kind of enjoying. I think I've really embraced that. I think I've finally started to embrace that part of using social media.
Thank you for sharing
It
all
was
that
too
in.
much. That was too much, too much. No one gives a shit about what I just said.
I give some
You
shit.
you do, yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
I asked the question, I wanted to hear the answer.
Mhm.
Um,
And you were very patient, I appreciate that. Because
I
you've heard some of this before? I know you have, I know you have. So that was a kindness, thanks.
no problem. I think I want to land on what you said at the tail end about the brand. I
Mhm.
think um, I think the essence. Okay, even so, I don't like calling it a brand because then I it just doesn't feel authentic, but it's okay. So if we were to continue to use that word brand or life resume, which is also something that's been a term that's been coined that I've heard, um, it boils down to what you said about doing the work. You're not going to grow anything is if you don't do any work, especially yourself. And so for people who are interested in growing a brand, it's like they separate that idea of the brand from who they are. And maybe
Mhm.
that's a good thing because maybe they don't want the brand to be connected to who they are. But let's say the brand is them or something that they
Well, the
really.
brand is that's the thing. It is always you, and I think that's what's kind of fascinating. The brand is always you. I think it never is not you.
But I think sometimes people don't want it to be them. I think they want that separation. But regardless, for me, the bottom line is do the work, whatever the work is. You're not going to grow anything. You're not going to build anything if you don't do anything. And I think that is key. That is the number one that is the number one foundational piece of information that anybody who wants to build anything needs to understand. Nothing grows if you don't do any work. And it's like some people just don't want to do any work. They want things to happen without having to do anything. And I think that I don't know where this idea comes from. Maybe it's as old as time. The most successful people, and you can define success in many different ways, are people who put in the work. So, for example, let's use you for example with your poetry. Let's say that you would love for your poems to go viral, or for people to want to pay for them, or for people to commission you to write poetry. Okay, and I don't even know if any of that is on your radar, but let's say that's what you wanted to do. That's where you wanted to go. You can't write 2 poems and then be like, "Hey, people, I'm selling poetry. Come see me." You gotta put in the work. So for you, like, man, you have I don't even know the number, but it's crazy. Like, you're constantly creating content, and it's content based on your lived experience you ask for prompts all the time on Insta. You're like, "Hey, write a poem with me. Let me write a poem with you. Drop me a prompt and I'll do something. I'll build something." And anybody who would go to your site would be like, "Whoa, like this is prolific. Like this guy does the work." There's a big difference between people who do the work and people who don't do the work. If you have no body of it's like I don't even want to call it a portfolio because I know you're not doing it that way. You have a home where you post your creative and it's just there for everybody to see. People don't realize that that's the work. It doesn't and it's not work for you. Like it's just part of who you are, it's what you do. You're constantly writing. It's what you do. It's what you enjoy. But from the outside looking in, it's the work. You're doing it. But it's harmonious with the way you're operating, the way you're living. Sometimes maybe it's a chore. Because I know you've told me like and this is just me explaining my perspective to you based on the information you've given me. I know sometimes you'd say to me like, I'm working on this one piece and it took too long, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that's cool that you have like You have an idea of how you want to shape what you're creating. And then in your mind, you have like a timeline. Like all these things are happening for you that you could do a master class on it, and it could have nothing to do with poetry. It could all be about putting in the work in order to find success. And that's how business people might brand it, right? Like a business person might say to you, I need to sit down for an hour and talk to you about your creative flow with poetry. And then next thing you know, they bang out a website and they're like, go cluffing, buy some poetry. And they turn it into a business machine. But really, all you're doing is you're writing your poetry. You're doing what you always do. So, end of the day, end of the day, you're doing your poetry. I'm writing via Twitter, and I'm not doing it. I'm not I'm not I'm doing it for a number of reasons. One of the low level reasons is the brand. That's a low level reason. Um, because people are gonna say, "Oh, you're on Twitter? Yeah, check me out. Let me know what you think." They might not be interested in anything I do, and that's okay because I'm not doing it for them. Just like you're not writing poetry for everybody else.
Mhm.
You're writing poetry because it feeds you, it does something to you. Um, it's for Chris. Um, and I think it connects to your value system. It connects to the way you're living your life. Uh, I'm going to go out on a limb and say family first. So it's built into like you're living your life as a dad and a husband and a teacher, but you're also doing this other creative that feeds you, that works with your life. And so the bottom line of all this is that, and I was telling you this, I was talking to a young teacher, and the young teacher was like, a dog after a bone. How do I become a leader in my realm? And I'm like, why are you asking me? And then I was given feedback about the way he perceives me as a leader in my realm. And it's like, okay, well then let me tell you, there's no secret. You gotta have a path, you gotta put in the work. It's not gonna it's not gonna happen instantly. So find something you like to do, keep creating, keep sharing, keep pushing, keep leading, and eventually I hope you land in a spot that you're really happy with yourself and you're happy with what you've created. Because if you're doing everything for everybody else, you'll be chasing your tail forever. And I've written about this. I've researched and written about this, and they come out as tweets. And I've written tweets about this business of like wanting to do everything. You can't do it all. So pick one or two things that you'd really like to work on and chase them in a systematic way. And you'll find success. You might come to the end of chasing something or learning about something or creating something and realizing you don't like it. It's not for you. It didn't work out for you. Right. And
Mhm.
it's like you just move on, but don't toss away everything you did because it's part of your story, it's part of your journey. Um, Again, if you look at this like from a business model, there are business people who say, I tried A, B, C, D, and E, and I failed at all of them. And now I'm doing F and I'm loving it and I'm making money. So I'm just going to keep going. That applies to life. It's not just business. You want to become a better listener, right? Do some reading about it. What's a good listener do? How do they operate? What does science say? What does art say? What does Jimmy say? And then put it all together, synthesize something that works for you and start practicing. You do that, you focus on that for a couple of months in an authentic way, you're going to become a better listener, I hope. And then once you feel like you've got some fluency there, you're good, then start chasing something else. But if you want to be everything to everybody all the time, right there, bro, that is the success. That is the recipe for failure. 100%. You're not getting anywhere. I don't care who you are. You're not getting anywhere. That's not how it works. So there's my TED talk, like, or there's my recorded podcast talk. Forget Ted. They're done. That's my decoded podcast.
I like that, Ted. Oh,
It's
Ted.
my it's our Jimmy talk. Jimmy X, baby, or Jimmy Y. We could do our own thing. We don't need Ted. Jimmy talk, decoded talk, whatever.
Jimmy talk.
All our listeners can tell us what they like better. Do you like Jimmy talk or do you like decoded talk? It's
That's
your
right.
call.
That's right. Um, I dig everything you're saying. I just, yeah, the whole, kind of do it for you, and just go as hard as you possibly can and see what happens. I'm really starting to like that mindset. Just see what happens. And you can be self-directed. I mean, part of it, one of the kind of one of the, there's one of the things about my life is that I don't have to do this for money. And I get it that other people like, so in talking to some artists, there's this one really cool artist, Fazuli, Abominable Inc. on Instagram. And I've had a couple conversations with them. I first connected with them because they were offering graffiti lessons. And at that time I didn't know where they were located. I didn't know. So I reached out and I thought, you know what? I would love to take these lessons. I said, and bring Maddie along, and we'll learn about stenciling, like creating stencils, like not just the cultural part of it, but the actual technique side of it. What kind of spray paint, what kind of markers, how do you clean them and maintain them? Because there's a whole like the markers that if you're kind of like on brand with your graffiti art, like your canisters have the spray nibs come off so you can clean them. You might even be I heard of somebody that compress their own cans because they need uh a certain sort of like pressure, like they understand what that kind of airbrushing thing does, and each canister nib, I don't know what they, but does a different kind of spray from narrow to wide, from soft to really powerful splats. Your markers are refillable, like they're these paint markers that you can like think of like a bingo dabber that you would sort of like, but for paint. So I was following their feed. I was like, this is really cool. And I reached out to them, and I've actually bought some stickers from them. They have an Etsy site. Actually, they may have moved, but they were on Etsy. But I've had a couple DM conversations. They're also, okay, so they're a DJ, they're involved in film, and they're an artist. So they're living a trifecta of the creative world. And I've had conversations with them. Like, this is what they do, this is how they pay the bills. And I love having that connection to somebody that, like, I consider myself a creative and an artist, but I'm not dependent on it to pay the bills. And I'm happy that I don't have to do that, that I actually have something else that I have to put a lot of work into to be good at it. So I keep my job and I keep paying the bills. Um, but I love the fact that I know a few people, this is from Insta, that I can ask them direct questions like, what is it like to sort of do this? Because the hustle is constant. And the ones that do it really well, another really cool dude that's fascinating to me is this guy, Matthew Zarimba, and he's a former, actually I won't say former, like he's a he likes doing like he's lettering. So he's kind of takes the graffiti lettering, but he does it in art. He's got some really cool mixed media pieces of phrases that he's created with an image that super basic, um, super basic, and in its simplicity, it just gets right into your brain. So he has created these things that become thought fuel. But the same thing, I've had conversations with him about wellness, like him talking about the impact of creating. I've even had conversations with him about the algorithm of Insta. He was the one that first introduced me to, and now it's a little bit tropey, but artists, it was a few years back. He said he posted up on his Insta feed. He's like, please, if just let me know if this is coming up on your feed and the details of it. So he was asking, what time of day does it come up on your feed? Um, And he said, of course, you may just be kind of logging in and you see it, but what time of day do you see it? He said, because right now I'm finding out that my feed is not being put up on my followers like feed lines. Like my posts are not popping up on people's feed lines. He said there's something in the algorithm that Insta has changed, so it's putting up other things first. And part of this always comes down to: are you paying Meta, Instagram, to be a confirmed or a sponsored thing? Right? They got to make their money. So any of us freebs that are using it, like, we don't take priority, no matter the fact that this is our business. Like, we're trying to sell things in order to put food on the table. So the only way to sort of re-up yourself is to pay to get, advertisement status, use a professional account, and kind of feed the machine. And then your stuff will populate faster on your followers lists. So this has been really cool to hear about this. And the next conversation, I'm actually going to reach out to Fazuli and Zarimba to ask I might even be I don't want to misquote his name. I just want to check this. Anyways, I want to see if they'll talk to me a little bit about the, like, what does that really like, what are the steps? What are those steps that you're constantly taking to manage the business using tools that are free? Does that make sense? Because you can't at some point, I think you do have to pay into tools. Like, you have to get different tech or equipment in order to kind of, like, you can have a quick ascension. Like, maybe I get on a run where I pull off like 10 poems that, like you say, go viral. Well, in order to like, part of that is accidental. I'm inspired. I notice. I come across the right words. I have access to the right words. I have access to the right learning because I've read a lot about the structure of poetry. I feel brave enough to post. So there's like a lot of factors that would come into play for me to get like 10 poems in a row that a broad scape of people are like, whoa, like, this one phrase is awesome. I love what you noticed there. To turn that into a on command type of pursuit is just mind blowing to me. And I can remain naive and say, "Well, just I think part of it is that that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna remain naive. I'm just gonna keep posting up shit. I'm just gonna keep writing stuff. Now, at some point, something may change, and I'm like, "Okay, I really do wanna try to find a way to monetize this. Maybe I will. Maybe I will." I think that's probably part of, you have your whenever I've gone visiting somewhere, so back to this vacation thing, I do my research ahead of time, and I'm like, okay, if I'm going, like when we did our East Coast trip this past summer, we knew exactly the places we wanted to see, and along the way, I was taking notes, like, oh, so we were there, and all of us were like, hey, did you know? Hey, did you? And we were kind of sharing the little bits of information that we found, and it really made the experience richer, right? And you also feel like you're getting that, not just richer, but the experience is denser. So I'm kind of doing the same thing with Twitter. So I'm going back in now with my rules as a creative. So I'm going back. So my lived experience as a creative, I'm giving precedence over the rules that I would use as a teacher. So that in itself has really changed the people that I'm following on Twitter. And the fact is, I know where they are. I know the town. I know where they live in the town. Some of them I've followed. Some of them I could reach out to. But I think to myself, why reach out to them there when I have their phone number? I could text them directly. Why interact here when, if I do it over my Insta, then I have my artifacts of learning? Like, why not just interact with them over there? So I'm digging it. I'm digging it. And the thing that I love, I told you this, I've even noticed that you're using it differently since I left. And that's cool because it's like I'm getting to know another part of you, um, and noticing that you've changed your approach to using it as well. I love it.
And we talked about this on the on-ramp that it's
Mhm.
feeding me in a different way, and I'm feeding it in a different way.
I
Uh,
think you're even going to a different part of the buffet though. Like, I think you're like, I never ever went and checked out, you know, the prime rib bar. So like you're like just you say it's feeding you in a different way, but I think your deliberate and intentional uh approach is that you're actually you're going to a different part of Twitter. And a good example of that, I said to you, like, yo, dude, like, you're rocking this mental health space. Listening to the spaces that the Twitter spaces that you hosted. I was like, I knew that was part of you, but you're at a different part of town now. Like you're in a totally different part of town. So I like.
It's definitely been an evolution,
Mhm,
right? Just and I think you'd use that word too with your process. It's evolved.
mhm,
It's really about learning just learning different things and being okay to try different things. Um, the research is important. I know sometimes I'll just act without researching, and that's important sometimes too because in and of itself it is research. It's like, okay, I'm experimenting here, and it's not based on anything solid, but I'm just gonna give it a go, right? Sometimes
mhm.
it's a hunch. Sometimes you see somebody else do something, and so you try it. Like it's um it's funny because sometimes when I'm on Twitter and I'm scrolling, I feel like I can see the matrix. I can see the
I love that.
patterns, I see
I
the
love that.
numbers, I see it all just coming down in front of me. And recently somebody reached out to me and said, "Hey, I have to tell you I've noticed what you're doing on Twitter and it's next level." And which is I take that as a compliment, but then they said to me, this was the best part because this is coming from a dude who's he's got a full-time day job just like you and I, but he's also a hustler. Like you can tell he's also experimenting, he's also wanting, so he's observing right now and he's like, I see the shift in what you're doing and I know based on my learning that you it's like you're all in. You're going hard. Um and then he said to me, "But I know how much work it takes." So he's like, basically, he was like, "Good on you for putting in the work, not for, hey, I really like what you're tweeting and the way you're." No, it was not about that. It was again about the foundation. He's like, "Dude, I know how much time it takes to do what you're doing, and you're doing it, and it's off the hook. So like, I just wanted to let you know." And I responded and said, "Thanks, and I'd love to talk more with you about it." But there was no reach back, which is fine because everybody's living their life. But I'm in a space where I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to share. But he hit the nail on the head when he said, "I know it's a lot of work." And it is, but I don't really see it as work because I'm doing it anyway. Like it is it is so funny to see like if you were in my head and you'd see the process. It's hilarious because it's like I watch something or read something or observe something and then I think to myself like I make connections to it or it just happens automatically because I'm buying what people are selling. And I can take all that and boil it down into like 220 characters. And there's something enjoyable for me about being able to do that in my head whether I'm good at it or not. It's kind of neat to filter something big into something small into a tweet. And then it's like I like that type of writing. You know, I've read some really cool it's funny. People I've read articles and posts about how to connect your Twitter to your blog to this to that. And it's like first you write it's very systematic, right? Which sometimes I really like and sometimes I really don't. So some people argue that you should start by writing a huge blog post and then cherry picking your blog post and turning them into tweets. I'm the other way around. I like to write little bits in Twitter and then as those build, then I could turn it into a blog post. But I'm only going to write a blog post if I feel like I want to write a blog post. I'm not going to write a blog post because it's part of a bigger process that's going to lead me to somewhere that I don't even want to go to. I don't want to take that path. I've written some Twitter threads that could easily be blog posts, but I don't want to play it that way. So I don't. So again, y- I kind of feel like you have to know your purpose. You have to know what kind of gets you going and what works for you. And but then be open to growing and learning more. So it's always like who knows, you could leave Twitter in a week, then come back in the summer and look at my content and my approach and be like, whoa, he shifted again. Like it looks different than when I was visiting in January. Uh, and it's like it reminds me of, so you come to visit Twitter and you're like, oh, Roland, you got a new you're doing something new with your beard because you haven't seen me in months. But then when you see me, you're like, hey, dude, you lost 10 pounds, or you gained 10 pounds, or I really like how you're shaping your beard these days because you haven't seen me. You've been
Call that the
thing.
grandma effect.
I
Like where,
Yeah, tell us about that.
yeah, sort of like every time the in-laws kind of come and visit, inevitably they'll say, "Oh, man, yeah, you're a little bit grayer there, Chris," or "The kids are so tall. When did that happen?" And I think that type of noticing, I think is wonderful. I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful that um one, that it's noticed and just acknowledged, but two, there's something really satisfying because that means that growth was happening. That means that change was happening. So no matter how static sometimes we can feel like our lives are, it's really cool to get some of the long-term relationships, awesome. Long-term relationships that you're around all the time, awesome. Intermittent relationships that still feel deep, that can speak to you about how different you seem, those are critical too. Because often the people that I think, or the places that the people and places that you constantly revolve around, I think it's really difficult to appreciate your growth around those spaces. I think it's necessary to have some people that you interact with on a more intermittent basis, so you really do feel like there's some work to get from where it reminds you that relationships take work, because in that moment you realize that there's been distance between the two. And one of the things that's so frustrating to me, and I've actually put this to people, is when the first stories, I don't like sitting and talking about stories. Like if all we're talking about when we hang out are stories from the past, then I don't know that that's interesting for me in relationships. And I'll throw down, like I've hammered um my in-laws for this in the past, and my mom as well. Like, I don't want to talk about these stories anymore. I just don't want to exist there, because if this is all we have, it's not. I was there. I have my version of it. I know what my path was. I don't need to sort of I don't want to exist there anymore any longer than I have to. So I like these. Let's grow. Let's talk about the new. Let's make plans. Like, sort of like, let's not only acknowledge that the relationship has come from somewhere, let's take this relationship somewhere. So that's the grandparents effect, right? And I like the challenge to make sure that I'm living a life that I change in, that I'm living a life where I am doing different things. So,
When you're talking about that, it also reminds me of, for me, the importance of sometimes being in a rut is not the worst thing.
mm-mm.
Because you talk about, you're mentioning change and the grandma effect, and I just thought to myself, sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's okay to sit in a space where there is no growth, because I think that will lead you to growth, right? Like some
I also
people.
think that's a falsehood. I actually think that I get what you're you're kind of like, you're doing the attaboy kind of thing. Don't worry. Don't worry. You can take down, you can sort of like take that moment. That's what I'm hearing, not what you're saying. But I also say that even in that moment where you might not feel or notice that something different is happening, I think it's important to accept that there is. It's just a matter of maybe slowing things enough down to actually notice. Because even in those moments where you feel like if I can't do poetry, I know that my brain is doing something else. It could be thinking about a drawing, it could be thinking about this podcast, it could be thinking about putting together a video. But if my focus of productivity isn't right there in front of me, I know that my brain is plotting to do something. And maybe that slowing down just allows that stuff to kind of come to the front of the brain. So sorry, I cut you off, bro.
No, no problem. I mean, I guess that is some of the things you said there is where I wanted to land. Like
Mm.
even those moments of, like, I guess at the end of the day, the ups and the downs are all part of every time. you look back on a time period, whether it was good or bad, you are where you are today because of those time periods, because of what's happened. So now am I saying like I'm not going extreme, like, people get like major anxiety and depression and stuff, and that sucks, but it's still part of your journey. And if you got through it, then you move forward, right? Like in the space yesterday, one of the people in the space was talking about suicide
Mhm.
and that they had written a thread about it. And I think part of their point was nobody wants to talk about it, but there are hashtags on Twitter with loads of information living under those tags. So obviously people are talking about it. So why are we not talking about it? It's interesting to me. And then it's like one of those things where I feel like, okay, I need to shut my mouth and open my ears. And I need to hear what's going on here. I need to hear this. And then what can I do with this? So it's like if you're still here with us, it means that you've gotten through some stuff. And I'm not saying, and I've gone through some stuff that's like I wish I never had, but I can't do anything about that. I can't turn back the clock. All I can do is kind of try to find meaning from it. And you know me, some of it I've not found the meaning. Some of it still rubs me in a very caveman way where I stop thinking and I just live in emotion. Um, there's no immediate growth doing that, but it's a selfish thing. It's a habitual thing. And it's just sometimes part of my way. It's part of my way. Um, and another big thing, like when I talk to people about like leadership in the work that I do, anybody who knows me well, they might not describe me this way, but they've seen it. They see like, okay, a problem is put in front of me or us, whatever the situation is. I will go dark before I go light. So I'm not going to be the guy, generally speaking, that's going to like be all flowers and sunshine. And no, I'm going to look at the problem or the situation. I may go dark fast in terms of like complain about it, blame other people, look at external factors on why this is happening or has happened, but I don't live there. I go through that. I feel those emotions. I deal with those thoughts. And then I'm like, okay, it's time to come out of this now. What does this look like on the other end? What can I action to change things? What can I action to try to make things better? This is my process, and I've come to realize it and I've come to be okay with it. It's who I am. If other people don't like it, that's okay. That's their prerogative. They're going to operate in their own way. So it's funny because I could be sitting across the table from a principal who gives me the situation and then I go dark with it. But then the next day I'm sitting in their office again and now it's like, okay, let's look at the process we can take. Let's look at the actions I can engage in to try to push this into like a better outcome. That's okay for me, man. That's how I roll right now. I used to roll that way and not understand. Now I still roll that way and I understand. I don't know what comes next, but it works. It works for me. And people who know me know that. Um, it's also part of like understanding it's okay. Like I've also been doing a lot of reading around men and emotion and being raised a certain way to act a certain way that I think is the right way based on my gender. I've come to realize that a lot of that it doesn't need to be that way. I can be a tough dude sometimes and I can also be a soft dude sometimes. Um I can show emotion. Emotion's not bad. These things are all I know it, but I still don't operate that way. Like I don't I've not actioned these things, right? Like because it's hard to change. It's hard to change, but I'm moving in the change direction. Talking to my boys about it a little bit. I know that when my wife brings it up, sometimes I put up a wall. That's that's my first action. But then after I have time to process, I shift. It's an exciting but also scary time in that it's complicated. It's not easy, but talking about it is good. Knowing who you are and where you should shift is good. But also knowing that sometimes when you don't shift, there you can learn a lot from that too if you're open to it. It's like all these things coming at me at once. But the more you know, so it's one of those things where it's like I'm happy with who I am, but that doesn't mean that I'm closed off to change. It just might look different. It might take time. I'm shopping around. If I'm going to change, how do I shift? Where do I go? How do I get there? Do I really want to get there? It's like, what are my intentions? There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. But this all takes work. It always comes back to that. If you don't do the work, you're not going to know. You're not going to know. Sometimes I'm scared to do the work. That's also normal. People are scared to do the work, but it pays off. It leads you forward, I believe.
At some point, one of our conversations, maybe it was last week, and we were talking about being deliberate. And I think that deliberate, I was thinking about afterwards about the difference between intentional and deliberate. And I think intentional probably happens first. Deliberate is the commitment. So you can sort of have intention. I think it's almost like it's the appropriate noun to the verb of being deliberate, like you kind of move into motion. Um, and when I think about, if we talk about people's intentions, um, we we assume that that part of that is deliberate, then we can get into trouble, or we can get into a good place as well. So someone that does something that's offensive and they say and then they sort of counter, they say, oh, but that wasn't intentional. I think we're put in that space of the power of deliberation, because it's there you decide, okay, intentional is kind of the plan, but deliberate means that there's a target, that it was purposefully done. And I think as a super villain, it's bad, but I think as a superhero, it's valuable. I think that to do things deliberately also means that you get to test who and where and when and why you are against the other. Could be a person, could be a theory, could be an activity. And I like to put those two things together. And I forget what the example was that you and I were using about being deliberate. I actually don't remember. I think it was about maybe leadership. Maybe we were talking about being a principal. We were sort of framing it that way, how important in meetings. That's what we were talking about, being in meetings and saying your piece, but not constantly feeding, just really listening and taking in what's happening around you, and then marrying your intention with deliberate action. So knowing who to make eye contact with, knowing who to speak directly to not use the royal we, to sort of come in and say, here's what I believe, here's why I believe it, here's my suggestion for moving forward. And sometimes even after that, saying, and if the group decides not to move forward with it, I'm still going to move forward with it in this other way. Now, again, there can be a lot of dark involved with that. If you're a complete a-hole and like you're doing things that are malicious and not nice, people are like, whoa, that was kind of scary. But what I've found is that in those situations, people tend to be like, they're grateful that you sort of spoke from a place of, learning and authenticity, but they also are, I think, more easily say, I disagree with you, but I do appreciate how straight up you were there, that it wasn't abstract. You said exactly, how this committee could move forward and find success. You said exactly what that board protocol, the problem with it. it wasn't abstract, leaving us wonder, like, what did we just talk about? We actually know exactly what the conversation turned into, what the moment turned into. When it comes to our wellness, I think, when I was posting up into our WhatsApp chat, so the book club for men, I had a moment of like, you know what? I'm going to put this out there, and I'm going to put out my colonoscopy sort of moment from this week. I'm going to put it in there. I recognized exactly the power of starting that conversation, and I started. My hook was being jokey and just kind of setting out like I was being humorous. That's my spoonful of sugar in the front end. And then there were a few people that were playing and kind of like commenting. And what I love is that, so my intention was, to sort of to open a conversation about this procedure that when you turn 50, it's important to go get tested, right? And then I realized my deliberation, what I was being deliberate about was making sure that no individual in there that commented didn't get a comment back. I was very deliberate in sort of connecting back and still sharing. And then I went back to the group and I said, look, get this test done though. And I still have another thing that I'm going to put into the chat. I'm still going to put one more thing in there because there were, it didn't happen in this space, but it did happen at work when I was talking to someone. They had sort of revealed how afraid they were about doing this. They were really, really concerned, much like the individual that you were mentioning before about the dentist office. So, deliberately stepping into this space with my intention of remaining open and creating conversation has been valuable. And I've had some really great conversations around this. Now, I don't know for sure if it's good, neutral, bad as far as helping my own thinking. I came in fairly balanced about it, and I shared some of the stories, even cluffing the conversation, just like chatting with different people. Some of the stuff that I observed. I wrote a piece. I wrote a poem about one of my experiences there. Um, a little procedure is the name of the poem. Um, so I'm already synthesizing the effects. So it's been a very cool way to talk about stuff that, I mean, I didn't have a conversation about this around anybody before I was in the situation of having to have the procedure. And that's problematic. And we take that about mental health in general. It's way better to have conversations about mental wellness before you find yourself potentially in crisis or at a loss or at a wall, because everyone's going to get to the loss, the wall, the isolation, that moment of like not knowing what to do. How wonderful is it if you've already started the conversations and who you can then have the conversation with, right? I think it's one of these things that just can kind of happen, and you find yourself like, my hope is always someone has a crew that they can talk to. So I love what you're mentioning about. I love how this flows out of your intentional use of Twitter into the mental wellness space, and then this other space that you, myself, and other members of the book club are kind of nurturing as well. Um, I'll say, to talk about men's health and in a way that is comfortable for men to do is something that I've come to crave. My lived experience is that those conversations in the past only happened after someone has died, or when someone is actually in the process of treatment or about to go for a little procedure. And you're like, hey, that's not so little. Do you need some support with that? So thanks for that thought fuel.
That group is a good group. Like when I think of the book club for men and the guys we have in our WhatsApp group, um, I'm like, I'm in awe that we've been able to gather people who, to me, all seem to be I don't even know how to say it. Like, it reminds me of the book we read, Modern Manhood. We all seem to be wanting to live in a space where we acknowledge we are men, but we also acknowledge that it is not as simple as that. And the old stereotypes we don't necessarily subscribe to them and want to live that way. We want to be this is how I take it. We want to be more whole. We want to be loving to the people around us. We want to model, positive ways of living, and that it's not necessarily all about this is how a man would do it as opposed to a woman. Let's say it's a group where we're very respectful when we talk about other people and just people in general. Now, I mean, let's add some layers. I think 99% of us are teachers. And so, generally speaking, we work in an environment where, our job is to support other people and build
Mhm.
them up, not break them down. That's not to say we don't have our faults. Like me, I struggle with the idea of being a stereotypical man. Um, and I love that people generally stereotype me that way when they meet me because of my cultural background, because of my appearance, because of the things I like. You know, why I can like hockey and still hug my son, tell him I love him, right? I can enjoy watching football and throwing the football around with my boys and roughhousing, but still comfort them when they cry, which is something I'm not saying I do that. I'm saying I'm learning how to do that, you know? Um, a great example this summer or last summer, me and the boys were out for a bike ride. And my one son, we were on a gravel path and he fell and he scraped his knee and he yelled twice. And when I got to him, I the first thing I said was stop yelling. And when he remembers that situation, he says to me, it's funny, he's like, why did you automatically tell me to stop my emotion? I'm like, whoa, whoa. What I was dealing, was I not dealing with you? Was I not comforting you? And I'm like, I just didn't need we didn't need attention brought to ourselves. Like we didn't need I guess I didn't want 50 people to come rushing over to help. So I was like, you don't need to yell. I'm here. Let's talk about your pain. Anyway, his perception is you were being a stereotypical man. You wanted me to man up. I'm like, whoa, whoa. I'm sorry that you're taking it that way and I'm listening to you, but I just didn't want 50 people over here. Maybe that's part of being a stereotypical man. I don't know. But did I not comfort you? Like, did I not do some things that aren't stereotypical of how you see a man? And this conversation pops up all the time. Remember when I fell off my bike and I'm like, I try not to get upset. I try to listen. And then I explain my reasoning and then I reflect on why it is that I have that reasoning. So, and then now we joke about it. It's like, okay, next time you fall off your bike, I'll just let you yell and scream while I clean your knee and put my arm around you and when the 50 people come over to check in on you, you can talk to them about it because I'm going to be focused on you, not the 50 people. And then we laugh, kind of thing. Ha ha ha. The group, the BC for Men group, I'm comfortable and confident that those men in that group demonstrate that they're willing to every day work towards becoming better fathers, better husbands, better sons. And I'll go as far as to say, if one of them told us, if one of them disclosed in the group that they don't identify as a man, that's good too. Like, if you're comfortable in this space, do you want to talk about that? Do you want to maybe, like, selfishly, I see it as a moment of education. Talk to us. Tell us what's up, what's going on, why are you here, like what is it about this group that you're okay to tell us this? These are good things because I think they inform us on how we proceed and how we live. And I'm not a perfect father and I'm not a perfect husband, 100%. I'm not a perfect son either. I'm not perfect at anything, but I believe that I'm on a better path than I was 10 years ago as a man. I identify as one. So I want to become better at being one, whatever that is. But I'm learning now that what it is means to be a lot of everything, a lot of different things, to be open, to be firm when it needs to be. I think that's for any human, not just for being a man, you know? I see you nodding, so it's like you agree, like people need to be firm. People need to know what they value and then live by that. But they also need to be aware and reflective and know that they have things to work on. It's layered, right? But I still like calling myself a man. I like that. I like living in that space.
The when you talk about your when you mentioned that moment with your son, um I also think what's really important is you say to be reflective. Uh, so I'm assuming what you mean is inwardly. So I think in that same with that same phrasing is also to realize that that happens outwardly. And that moment with your son where it lands for me is that it's a reminder of despite the thinking that you're trying to help him, that he was reflecting, or at Seaman has since then reflected back at you a version of you that's incongruent with your belief system. And those moments, I'll say, for men are so important to take in, because, and you kind of paused there, you said, I guess I was kind of doing a thing that was sort of, I was kind of, you know, manning in a way that I was controlling the situation and we didn't need anyone else. Like it seemed like you were sort of talking like the potential, there's the embarrassment or other people kind of watching or other people giving advice, whatever was sort of motivating that. You wanted to keep others away while you dealt with the moment in front of you. Um, and what I love is that your son seems to be saying, my response was actually designed to get help. Like this was, I was actually responding. I was expressing an emotion that was loud, that was in parallel with the pain that I was feeling. And the mirror he's giving you back is that, and it seemed like you're trying to stop that from happening. He sort of says, to sort of the be the man part. And I love these mirror moments. Um, I think there's the what's the song? Is it Cat's Cradle? Some it's about your child turning into a man, and it's kind of like that cycle of that's can I say in the usual way? Can we go? And it's kind of like the kid approaching the dad, always wanting to sort of do things and plan, and the dad kind of sloughing it off. And the mirror moment doesn't happen until the dad is older and starting to crave connection with the son. And the son's like, yo, dad, I'm busy. And the dad is like kind of recollecting that shit, man, like I wasn't in this relation. I was in this relationship, but I wasn't seeing the right stuff. Because it's sort of like that cycle of, the busy parent. I mean, you could do man or mother, man or mom or dad, it doesn't matter. But just the parent being too busy to really see what the kid needs. You think you're giving them what you think they need, but not what they actually really need or want. So I love that. I love that your son calls you out on that. Not as much for the, though I appreciate the dissonance and discomfort that may put you in, which I think is important. I think that's important for you, whether you do or not. But the fact that he advocates that way means that he's onto something about his version of being a man that I will say I was not aware of. I would have just let my dad operate that way and not said anything about it. So bittersweet. Bittersweet on that. But I dig that you're called out on that, because I also feel like this is also the process you're trying to call yourself out on it, right? You're sort of trying to be vulnerable enough to say to yourself, like, how do I grow differently? How do I sort of move differently? And while this is happening, someone outside of you does the exact same thing. And part of the defense mechanism is to kind of shut it down, but then realizing afterwards, well, maybe not. Like this too is part of becoming like the young man. I love it. This is so layered, but it's a great example. It's a great example of the spaces to remain open to. What's really important to notice. What's really important to notice. Mm.
Well, also, so I everything you said, I like everything you said. And whether I like it or not, it's still sitting in my head. But
Thank you for
part
liking it.
part of my son learning to be a man or whatever he ends up identifying as, and I just say that because only God knows what, yeah. Um, it's part of his process. So it's okay for him to reflect and call it out because like you, I would have never said anything to my dad about that. It would have just lived in my head forever. And that's how I grew up learning how to be a man. And I love my dad, but I would have never questioned him. I would have never done that to my dad. My son does that to me all the time. And sometimes I push back and it's not pretty, and sometimes I don't. Um and I'm recognizing I'm recognizing things like for example, I'm not very touchy feely. Like I'm not a big hugger. I don't walk around telling everybody I love them. That's just not how I grew up learning to be me. But my youngest, he'll come up to me. He's like, "Hey, can I give you a hug? I want to give you a hug. I love you." And I don't push back. I'm like, "Come on, give it to me." And it's funny because as he's hugging me and I'm hugging him back, he says to mom, "Look, dad knows how to do this." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do. And I'm not going to stop you from doing that. It's not how I operate. But if it's how you operate, I'm not going to push back on that. Be who you are." It's hilarious. It's hilarious. I'm laying in bed. I'm on the iPad. He walks in. He tells my wife and I love you guys. I'll see you in the morning." I'm like, "Love you too." I'm not the first one to say it. That's just not. Can I change? Sure, but it's not generally who I am, which is it can change. But he's taken it upon himself to express that to us, and I'm like, two thumbs up, kid. Like, keep being you. And it's a great reminder for me that he says it. I think he wants to hear it back. So I certainly give it back to him. Since he's been more like hugging and stuff, I've been more open to, like after he plays hockey or whatever, and we're walking out to the car, I'll put my arm around him and just chat with him or whatever, even if I'm giving him shit. I'll put my arm around him. Maybe it's a mixed message, but put my arm around him and I say, "Hey, I saw a couple of things out there that you need to work on," or just, "Hey, good game." And then he's like, What did you see? Good, bad, ugly." And it's like, I'm doing that. I'm even doing that with my older son. I'll because my older son and I are spending a lot of time together as I take him to the ski hill to do his volunteer work and to learn about the program that he's in for skiing. I'm getting more. I'm getting more reps with my older one too because I'm in the car with him, taking him and discussing things with him. And I don't know if you saw this tweet, but I tweeted out last week when he is volunteering, I'm usually at the hill with him. I don't want to drive him there and then drive home. I think that's a pain in the rear end, so I just stay. Bring my computer. Um, I do reading, I do writing, whatever. I work on my school stuff. But I always like to get out there and watch him working with the kids. I always like to spot him and see what he's up to. And he doesn't know I'm watching him, but I'm watching him, seeing how he's interacting with the kids he's skiing with and how he's talking to them and how he's supporting them. And I saw some things that were like really cool. Um, I saw him holding a kid's hand. This is good, right? Because he's showing compassion and empathy for other people. Um, I see him instructing. I love it, and I do it every time. Every time I'll close the computer, I go outside, I find him, I watch him for half an hour or whatever. I watch him go up and come down, stand in line. Like I watch the whole thing to see how he operates. And my favorite one was I'm standing there and he comes down with this kid, and the kid at the end falls, and the kid's legs are positioned in such a way that only a kid could do. Because if my legs were like that, I'd be like, just cut me off at the hips. Like my legs are never going to work again. Um, and my son, you know, grabs the kid like by the underarm and kind of picks him up and says, "Okay, okay, get your leg." And the kid's like, I can't do that to my leg. Like my skis are all tangled." And I'm standing there. I'm like, and I'm just whispering. I'm trying to channel my energy towards him. Like, take his skis off. Take his skis off. His legs aren't going to work that way. Take his skis off. And then I hear him say, "Okay, let's take this one off." So then he gets down, he clamps one of the bindings, the ski falls off. Goes, "Okay." And he goes to put him down. I'm like, "Don't put him down. His legs shouldn't be like this is not going to work out well. Once you put all that weight down on those legs." I'm like, "Take the other ski off." And I'm like doing the Jedi thing. And then he's like, "Okay, let's take the other ski off." Takes the other ski off. The kid fixes his legs. And then he's like, "Okay, let's get your skis back on." Any position. Like he's doing my job. He's treating the kid like a dad or like a parent. And so then after I said to him, "Hey, I saw you with that kid with the legs all," and I was doing this, and he's like, "Yeah, yeah. I wasn't sure what to do." And I'm like, "You did a great job. Just," I'm like, "do yourself a favor. Like, as somebody watching and like outside of it," I said, "just take the skis off right away." He's like, "Yeah, dad, that's what I figured. Like, there's no need to try to." I'm like, "Just take the skis off because those things," I'm like, "once they all," he goes, "I know, I know." The I know is like, "Shut up, dad. You know, let me do my thing." And I'm just like, "Okay, fair enough. You're the one learning to be an instructor. I don't know, but I'm telling you that did if that happened to me, I'd be like calling an ambulance. Like my legs don't work anymore. My skis need to come off." So I'm loving those moments with him. So when my wife says, like, "Aren't you just gonna drop him off and come home?" Aside from me being kind of like stingy on not wanting to drive all night, it's like, I'm getting more out of this than everybody thinks. Like I'm learning more about him. I'm having time with him. I call them reps. I get reps with him. Like with the little one, I get reps with him all the time because I take him to hockey all the time. I don't do that one with the older one. So during ski season, I need to milk the time. I need to milk the reps so that I can learn more. I can maybe make myself a little bit friendlier to him. And I'm still a jerk. Like when we got in the car the other day, I pulled out my phone and I turned off his internet in the house. Like right, like a jerk. I'm like, "You see this phone? See, this is your internet here? Off." And he's like, "What are you doing that for?" And I'm like, "I'll talk while we drive." And I'm like, "Your bedroom is out of control. I've asked you politely 50 times about the plates in the room. Like, I've had enough. So I'm not going to yell at you, but you're going to go home to a wasteland. You're not going to have any internet. So this is my way of telling you I'm done talking. I'm done asking." And then I listen to him. He's like, "Okay, okay. When I get home, I'm going to be tired, all this stuff." I'm like, "I don't care. I've asked you 100 times politely. I can't do it one more time politely. So no internet until you can do what you need to do. Do it. Let me know. I'll press the button back. You'll have everything you need to live your life." So this parenting thing, man, it's like I joked with my wife before we had kids. I said, "We better invest in a really good military school because I want nothing to do with the kids between 12 and 18 because they're going to talk back and they're going to treat us like garbage here and there because I know that's what I did to my parents." Well, I'm in the middle of it now and I don't have any money for military school, so I'm just living it up. Rochelle says, "Yes, Chris, cats in the cradle." Thank you, Rochelle.
That's the one. Yeah. And I'll go a different route on this. A few years back, probably on the cast. Had to be. I mean, the cast kind of parallels our friendship. So at some point, you were mentioning some of that. Oh, mind blowing, eh? Like 6 years ago. So let's take your older as an example. You were mirroring then, and you're like, something's not connecting here. And obviously, so this stuff takes time. So you have slowly found the way, like you said, to get more than what people realize. So that's wonderful. Like that's friggin' awesome because there's conversations. We have artifacts where we're both talking about that space that we kind of feel our proximity to each of our kids and how the relationships feel different. Like at some point, they kind of feel the same. and then almost suddenly they feel different. And I'm going through a little bit of that as well. But taking inspiration from individuals like you and the other readings I'm doing, like talking about the how do you stay close? Like what are the and how do you know that your intentional and deliberate steps are not just about you feeling close to the individual? How do you let them know that it's okay for them to feel close to you? Um, and the thing that I keep learning time and time again is that being still, being patient, being consistent, being compassionate, as you said, loving, and sort of getting there. You don't have to get there first, but just make sure you're there, because that moment of that loving moment is like, I like the comedy, the sarcasm that your kid is sharing, but there's mirror work there. Like I got to pay attention to that. Like I have to make sure that I'm available for when that thing happens, because like Rochelle mentioned, like that cat's in the cradle is could be based on observation, could be based on someone else's lived experience. If you're not feeding relationships in a good way, like they don't grow. Definitely, they don't grow one-sided, but they also can shrivel, right? They can shrivel. My sister calls me out on this, has been calling me out on this more frequently. She said the words that she feels that she's doing more work. So then you have to sort of, that the mirror is there. So right away I'm like, well, I felt I was doing the work, but obviously the work that I'm doing isn't the right work and it's not the work that this person needs. So then you're in the spot of not automatically moving to, well, I got to do more work. I stop at, do I want to do the work? So I have to make sure that I'm clear with that, right? And I'm not, I mean, obviously family, I'm going to shift to yes, but I think it's important to kind of pause there for a second and say, because I realize that I'm partially caught in a lie. I thought I was doing the work, but I'm not. Okay, so it's not what you need. So now I have to sort of realize like what I'm putting out is not what is wanted or needed. So then there is a process there to decide, do I want to up my game? Do I want to do things differently? Do I want to sort of like call more frequently? Do I want to, do more likes on social media? Like I think you kind of have to shift a little bit into tactical, because there's something put in front of you that needs fixing or wants to be fixed. And then you choose whether or not you want to engage with that. So kudos to you for doing the work, because you mentioned you noticed this a few years back. And I love the fact that you found a way to manifest it, because you're investing, you're connecting. And I just, I want that for you. I want you to have the relationship that will remind you that you were there, the moments that you were there. So good stuff.
I don't know what it looks like to everybody around here. All I know is, like, to me, I feel like I'm trying to be different. I'm trying to be open. I don't know if that's how it's
Well,
received, but
so
whatever. I mean,
we started here though about building a brand and how you just freaking do the work, and you do it in a way that is is um without that sort of idea of monetizing it or creating the currency that someone actually tells you your attempts are good. I think you instead measure it by how many more moments happen that would have never happened had I not been doing the work, right? The fact that your son pushes back is because you're starting to do the work. Something in there created an opportunity for your son to push back and say, hey, I needed this emotional moment, and that what you gave me wasn't what I needed. We can't say that it's just because he's thinking, creating this kind of like mindset, being sarcastic, being kind of like giving you a zinger. There had to have been something that, because you and I saying that we wouldn't have said that to our fathers means that there was a context in the relationship. There was no opening, there was no opportunity, there was no bridge to walk across. And I would say for me, that's not a good thing now, because I've learned to navigate the world like that. So I'm fighting my training as a boy to sort of do something different as a man and a dad. And that's incredibly challenging. So how other people perceive it. I mean, you can always ask for feedback. The next time you're bringing home Swiss Chalet or that second dinner, the 10 p.m. pizza, you could have a little comment card inside there. How am I doing? Fill out this Google form. Click the QR. Click the QR code. Everyone's got their devices. Okay, take out your devices. You can go to this Bitly. And everyone's like, wait a second. You created this Google form about you. Like, yep, just looking for some feedback. What, can we just tell you? Nope, I'm data tracking. Please put it into the Google form. I'll get back to you within 7 business days.
I like that. I'm data tracking.
As in DADA,
DADA.
you're daddy tracking.
What do you think, bro? We've been on for almost an hour and a half. Oh, it's the bird. Hold on, let me make this okay. And is the bird wearing sandals, or does it just look that way to me?
Flip flops, bro.
Okay, flip
Flip flop.
flops.
Yeah.
Very cool. The Twitter vacation.
Yeah. Twitter vacay.
This was season 6, episode 19, number 237. Hey, when we hit 238, we should celebrate. That's a big one.
Woot, woot. Hello to, who is it? Rochelle? Rochelle was here?
Rochelle, yeah, Madame.
Cool beans.
I call her Madame. She's like, I'm not at work right now. Well, maybe she is at work. I don't know.
Don't know. Could be home office, getting some
Home
prep done Saturday morning.
You never know.
Yep.
How much prep is she getting done listening to us?
I don't know. But teachers be prepping.
Teachers be prepping for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, bro. Have a good one. We'll talk. Yeah, we'll talk later.
Insert dramatic music.